Alright, I said it would do it with a pause, which didn't quite work out. So we're going to go ahead and push this off to here, and this will be the last one of these. And what I did was I spent a little bit of time going through and playing around with an object that I never would use. Like, once again, think about what I've done before this is you want to think about doing some mental math on a recurrent basis if you can. If it's consistent, using offset. If an object is not offset well, it'll be tough to learn to use it in different programs. So if you look at here, we know we have a couple corrections already to make. We have something there. Our layers are wrong. But we're going to look at now at how to modify these walls by using the modify multiline. Now, I don't even know what that command is per se, but we'll look at it later. Object multiline. And what we're looking at here is merge T, and what you need to do is learn to grab the T that's coming into the other one, and you see it break it. So we're going to do that all the way through. Merge T, and so merge T. If you're doing this on a regular basis, right, we'll see what happens later. It might be a problem, zooming in and out. Merge T, that's not the case. Merge T is you're grabbing the T, and then you're grabbing the wall into which it merges. So we've done all those all the way around. We now have this one merging into that one, and this one merging into that one. And essentially you've done all the wall layout with one small caveat here. We'll see whether this merging into that works, and it does not. So now you're going to do an undo here, and hopefully it hasn't done everything. You're going to go down now and then look for the next one, which would be modify object multiline, and you're looking at probably something coming out of the other one. Merge T, open T, close T, open cross, merge cross, and once again you will get somewhat frustrated. So we'll see if we do a corner joint there, second line there, and not too bad, but not so good. So we'll try that again. Modify object multi-line corner joint, and we'll try to go here up to there. That's not so good. And what eventually you might end up doing is doing some exploding or breaking, whatever else. Once again, I'm going to pause this and figure out the last little caveat here is. Alright, I finished that out. I'm not going to give away the secret in the end, except for the fact that every now and then you get to a point and you want to explode things and then fix them out. But what you see here is by the time you kind of open up the end of that, and we're going to go ahead and look at the properties now of this line. As you start thinking about that, right-click, properties. All of a sudden you start to see the properties. You've got more than one property being hidden because we've actually closed up that front and that back end of that. So it's actually hiding some of the properties. So learning that in the end when things get iffy, you go ahead and explode them becomes important. So you'll see that was basically exploding something like this, X or explode. What happens now is they've got individual lines, and so you can clean things up. If you're smart, you'll then put notes that you've done these types of things when you're working in programs. I'm just going to go and undo here and undo here and undo here, and I'm looking, I've got everything in multi-line. Let's finish out now with our windows by making sure we get to the sense that we can add layers by doing lots of different things, but by going to the layer command, going to a layer that we like to start, click here and then go to window, and I don't have, this is not something I'd set up earlier, so I'm going to go ahead and put the window. I'm going to make it in fact yellow so I can see it, and now I'm going to set my layer to window, so I can immediately grab that. I can right click, change the properties on it to the object being window. Later on you'll see how important blocks are in terms of setting things up, but we've got a window there, and now we can start looking for our ticks around here. We can look for the like windows that are in fact in this case a 5-foot window. That was a 4-foot window up there, so I can be on this layer, go I for insert, I can go to window 5, I can go ahead and bring it to, if you remember that end point of that point there, it drops in pretty nicely. Now I can left click spacebar, C for copy, and you can do multiple when you do this to the end point, that one. That's a 5-foot window. The other ones you'll have to realize then are at 90 degrees, and so you can do any number of things. Things you can do an end point, and then you can hit cancel here, go back to here, right click, go to properties and do your rotation. You start to see the rotation. This in fact is a rotation about the z-axis. Hit that 90 degrees, it comes in, and now you've got something you can copy around again. So you've got a window there. Left click spacebar, C for copy. You can now have any other 5-foot windows, which I don't see in the up and down. The rest of them are 4-foot windows. So hit an escape, come back here. That is a 4-foot window. You can left click spacebar, C for copy, take it to the endpoint here, and then once again left click, right click out in space, go to properties, change that rotation to 90 degrees, as the case might be. Tab over here, it fixes that. You go down here and you left click, spacebar, C for copy, go to the endpoint there. You now have essentially your windows on one layer, if you figure it out through. The last thing left, you've got one left here, and that is a 4-foot window. So you're going to left click spacebar, C for copy, to the endpoint of that. Alright, so as I go through here, that multi-line stuff is what I'm going to call it, is I'm not going to say it's completely bad juju per se, but it's got some problems. So I'm going to go ahead and make a layer called doors. What I'm doing here is I go through, I'm going to the layer command, I'm going to go to the window command, I'm going to go ahead and make a new layer, call it doors. Go ahead and change that layer color just so we can keep track of things a little bit better. Doors, and those are the door swings. I double click on that one to make it current, and we can immediately realize that that one has to be left click spacebar, move that one out to the endpoint there, and then immediately that should get changed to its property. You can go here and change your property there to doors. Now you have something you can kind of think about your door swings. I can left click spacebar. I can go ahead and C for copy. I'm going to go ahead and move it to the endpoint there. Looking at all my door swings, I can move mine here to the endpoint there. I can go ahead and move mine to the endpoint there. And my door swing here to the endpoint there. And with this, we're going to see then a little bit more fun, if you would. Looks like those are all my openings, and the last one here being the endpoint there. So now you get the sense of how things are going to work in terms of blocks and coordinate systems, in terms of relations and rotations and flips, and we'll just play around with those now. Remembering that anything can be done by a translation, a rotation, or a flip, and then a scale. So this one here, obviously, it was to be just scaled up. So you can left click, spacebar, scale, reference at to the endpoint here, and now you take it now to the new point there, and now you've got your door. It's not the best way because these doors will all look a little odd. This one here now is essentially going to be a flip and a rotate. So you can go left click spacebar, mirror, and basically if you just hit, and at this point the endpoint there, and then what you're going to do is left click spacebar, mirror. And if you think about it now, the mirror is going to be about the endpoint of that. You learn to play around. Now you're left click spacebar, going to scale, and you're going to go reference from the at to the endpoint. This is not the best way, but it's a way to get you used to what's really going on here, which is translation, rotation, scale, and flip. Left click spacebar, mirror, and now you're going to hit shift right click the endpoint and mirror it about there. And now you can left click spacebar, reference from at to the endpoint, and then to the new endpoint. You're using a reference distance and then another distance. This one here, again, the door swing is going to be flipped. So left click spacebar, mirror, yep. And then we can just mirror it about itself. And then left click left click, spacebar, 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 reference at to the endpoint, then to the endpoint. This would have been done essentially with most architectural programs. It's going to work different than this, but now left click, spacebar, spacebar, rotate ref at to the endpoint there. Second point is going to be shift right click to the endpoint there. New one is going to be to the endpoint there. Not quite right. Left click, spacebar, 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 reference at to the endpoint. And you can do it in one fell swoop, but getting used to these transformations being one thing or the other. So at this point, you have effectively the drawing done with all intents and purposes except for the bath and the stool here. And so what you can finally then do is remember how much of this stuff is out in decenter, it's called, decenter. So I'm going to try it decenter and see what I can find. The design center takes you out to all these wild blocks that are around on the planet. And so you can go back through and go back, I think, depending where you're at, look for a drawing. This would look like it's probably a house designer drawing. And look at your blocks here and see what you've got. You've got a bathtub, a 60-inch bathtub. It's pretty close. And so you can kind of take that one in at this point. Click on the 60-inch bathtub and drag, I think is what it comes down to. It's a drag in. So that's a little bit wide, but we'll go ahead and realize, did it have dimensions in the bathtub? It did not. So what you've noticed there, as I bring that in, I can left click, and then you start to see where that block was defined from the endpoint there. And then we can drag in, if we would, a toilet top. We're going to drag that one in. And once again, grab on it and realize left click, spacebar, spacebar, rotate 90 degrees. That wasn't right, but we can just left click, spacebar, spacebar, rotate 180. These kind of concept of blocks, left click, spacebar, spacebar, move, shift right click to near perhaps. Near is a great snap. That's going to back that up there on the edge. Not perfect. And we've got something in between, so I'm going to go ahead now and left click reference, left click, spacebar, 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 reference from at to the endpoint here, to the endpoint there, and then take that to the endpoint there. Not perfect. If we go ahead and grab this one here, left click, spacebar, we can move it, shift right click using near. Getting used to this shift right click for forced choice. That was not detailed as to where it was. And then we have finally some sort of sync in there. Let's see what we have in terms of our standards here. Doesn't look like it gave us one. So that might be something you'd have to do yourself. That, of course, went then on a layer that was doors, so that would not be good. So we would go ahead and go to here and go to make a new layer, and then I might say something like fixtures. I want to point out, notice no spaces, right? And I'm going to go ahead and make that color immediately, perhaps something different, cyan or magenta. Double click on that. Even though you don't need to, you can now grab these things, and as you grab more than one, right click and go to properties. It will just give you the common things that you can change. That should be on fixtures. You now have essentially that drawing done. The last thing left is to do dimensioning, and that will be covered later. Essentially, dimensioning has a lot to do with settings, and we'll look at how to go about dimensioning and using things. However, to start, all you really want to learn how to do is make sure that you go to dimension here, you bring up your dimension toolbar, and you start to realize aligned is the best one to use. I'm just going to check on one door, see what it looks like when I'm done. Settings are probably all wrong, and you start to see, well, that's screwy. It's 3 feet, but I can't see anything. But you would want that effectively then to be on the layer called what? Dimension. Right, so this kind of concept of getting used to the layering and the names and the et cetera, et cetera. I'll fix that just so it's not wigged out on you. I'm going to go now say dim style. Just like multi-line style, I'm going to go to architectural standard and I'm going to modify it. I'm going to modify using the fit tab. I'm going to change the user all I'm going to go ahead and change the user all scale of 12. Let's see how that looks like. Set current, close. That makes it look a lot better already. So that's a whole bunch, 15 minutes in this last bit, but what we've seen here is effectively what I want you to see is just because a drawing looks like it should be drawn with multiple lines, still learn to do the center lines and go from there. Thanks for listening.